welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a pretty big idea, the potential shift away from our current monetary system towards something called a resource-based economy.
That's right. It's a concept you often hear connected with Jacques Fresco and the Venus Project.
Exactly. It's this fundamental rethink, really, about how society could organize itself, without money being the main driver.
Precisely. And to help us explore this, we're using an article that, well, it looks beyond just the nuts and bolts of the economics. It really digs into the philosophical side, these sociological challenges involved in such a massive change.
Yeah, it highlights that this isn't just about, swapping currencies or something. It's potentially changing our core values, how we interact.
It's deep stuff. The article really underscores that potential transformation.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive, then, is to unpack what this article is arguing. What actually makes huge societal shifts like this even seem possible? Or maybe what makes them fundamentally tricky, perhaps even impossible?
What are those key dynamics? Yeah, let's get into it. Maybe we can start where the article it talks about the power, the surprising power of vague language.
Vague language. How so?
Well, think about terms like ethical or harmonious, inclusive. You hear these a lot when big new ideas are presented. The article finds it fascinating why these words, which sound positive, are so effective, especially right at the start.
Okay, let's unpack that. So the idea is these words are positive, aspirational, but maybe deliberately a bit fuzzy.
Kind of, yeah. They act like blank canvases.
So people can project their own hopes onto them.
Exactly. You hear harmonious society, and you picture your version of harmony. Someone else pictures theirs.
Which means you get this big wave of initial support, because everyone thinks, yes, this aligns with my ideal world.
That's the initial power. But, and this is a critical point the article makes, that ambiguity has a flip side.
A risk.
A definite risk, because that broad support might be built on very different, maybe even conflicting underlying ideas of what harmonious actually looks like in practice.
So when you try to define it later.
Exactly. When you get down to the brass tacks of how this ethical system works day to day, those different projections can clash. The coalition might just fragment.
Right. Which I guess leads us straight to the next point. The article really hammers home.
Yeah.
You have to move beyond those fuzzy feel-good terms.
Absolutely. You need specifics, actionable methods. If you actually want real change, not just a nice idea.
The broad ideals get people in the door, maybe.
They spark the interest, yes. They build that initial coalition. But they don't tell you how to build the house. The conversation eventually has to shift to the concrete stuff. How does this RBE actually allocate resources? Who decides? What are the mechanisms?
And that's where things get tough.
That's where the rubber meets the road, as they say, because detailing those specifics, resource allocation, decision-making, handling conflicts, that's when people realize, oh, wait, your idea of fair allocation isn't quite the same as mine. Those easy agreements can evaporate pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can see that. It sounds messy.
It is challenging. The article acknowledges that. Detailing specifics will lead to disagreements, almost inevitably. But it argues it's absolutely essential. You can't build a new system on vague hopes alone.
So it suggests leaders need to be smart about this. Start broad, then get specific.
Sort of a balancing act. Capture the imagination first with the big vision, the why, then carefully guide everyone towards the how, the complex, necessary details.
Okay, but what even gets people to consider such a radical change in the first place? What's the spark? The article mentions a kind of catalyst, right?
It does. And a primary driver, according to the article, is when a lot of people start seeing major failures in the current system, particularly a sense that it's corrupt or just deeply flawed and not working for them.
So it often starts with dissatisfaction.
Often, yes. People need to feel, maybe even personally experience, that the status quo isn't delivering.
That makes sense. It's hard to sell a whole new way of life if people think the current one is, basically okay.
Right. It's those direct hits, maybe economic insecurity, seeing environmental problems firsthand, feeling the effects of inequality that can really open minds to alternatives.
That experience creates the opening.
Precisely. The article uses Egypt as an example here. You had massive discontent fueled by perceptions of corruption. A huge movement rose up. But, the article argues, just identifying the problem, the corruption, wasn't enough on its own.
What was missing?
A clear, well-defined, structurally sound alternative, and crucially, a sort of technical understanding of how to actually build and implement it.
Wow, okay, so knowing what you're against isn't the whole picture. You need a viable plan for what you're for.
And a practical path to get there.
Yeah.
And the article also warns about another potential trap,
Which is?
relying too much on individual personalities,
Yeah.
leaders, charismatic figures. This is quite insightful, I think. The argument is that real, lasting change needs to be built on understanding the systems involved. It shouldn't just hinge on trusting one particular person, however inspiring they might be.
So less I follow this person and more I understand this proposed system and why it makes sense.
Exactly. The focus should be on the logic, the mechanics, the demonstrable benefits of the new model itself.
The article suggests that too much loyalty to a specific leader, even a well-intentioned one, could actually get in the way.
It can, yeah. If it stops people from critically examining the actual proposed system, the nuts and bolts, people need to grasp the practical advantages of, say, an RBE, how it tackles the problems they've experienced, rather than just being swept up by a personality.
Okay, that leads nicely into an analogy the article uses, something about cars.
Ah, yes, the electric vehicle analogy. It's quite useful here.
How does that work in this context?
Well, the article says just claiming an RBE is, like an EV, simply better for everyone, maybe better for the planet or more efficient, isn't enough to make it happen. The big idea might sound good: cleaner transport or fairer resource sharing. But for people to really buy in, especially on a societal scale, they need more. They need to understand the supporting infrastructure. For EVs, that's charging stations, battery production, where the electricity comes from.
Right, the whole ecosystem around it, not just the car itself.
Precisely. It's the difference between a catchy slogan, drive electric, and a truly functional system people can rely on.
So you need to explain the how. How will I charge it? How long does it take? What about long trips? It makes it real, even if it raises more questions initially.
Exactly. It makes the abstract tangible. And the article argues that this level of detail, this understanding of the practicalities, even if it seems more complex at first, is absolutely crucial for a genuine sustainable shift like moving towards an RBE. It moves us past wishful thinking.
Okay, so if we boil all this down,
Yeah.
what's the core message from the article about making such a massive change, whether it's to an RBE or any big societal shift?
I think the main takeaway is that this kind of systemic change isn't just a technical puzzle to solve. It's not just about economics or engineering. It's deeply tangled up with our emotions, our culture, how we process ideas.
So things like how language is used.
Yes, the power and pitfalls of that initial, vague, inclusive language. Then the absolute need to move to concrete plans. And the importance of people actually feeling the problems with the old system.
And understanding the new system, not just following a leader.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. Ultimately, it's about how we collectively come to understand, accept, and really embrace a fundamentally different way of living together.
Fascinating. It really lays out that tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between needing that big, inspiring vision and needing the nitty-gritty details for it to actually work. We've covered the role of seeing the current system's flaws, the risks of just following personalities. It shows this is way more than just drawing up a new economic blueprint.
Indeed. It really requires a profound shift in collective understanding in our social psychology, almost.
Well, this has definitely given us, or hopefully you, a lot to think about. And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. Considering everything we've just discussed, what do you think is the single most critical piece needed to successfully transition to a totally different way of organizing society? Is it that initial inspiring dream? Is it the detailed practical plan? Is it widespread anger at how things are now? Or maybe something else entirely? Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us today.